Hello and welcome to the Acumen Group, Acumen Magazine's latest weekly Pop You. And today I'm joined once again by Acumen editors, Dr. Sophia Sparks. Give a wave, darling. There you go. And Miss Linda Wave Villakazi. Little wave there, Lindy.
Hello.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. And what we're going to do, I'm going to make sure that you have contact information for the Acumen Group. All right, so I think one of you is watching as we're doing this. So it's getting ready. It's giving me a little feedback. Let me do this. I'm gonna mute you guys. Let's see if that works. All right, is that better? All right. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is put some contact information in. Again, this is the Acumen Group / Acumen Magazine. And what we do is examine eugenics in popular culture and everyday life, which means many of the things that you guys are wondering if this is racism, if it's racial, whether it's news items like post-traumatic stress, or new reports to say that racism is connected to health outcomes for both African Americans and for white people. Being a racist apparently also impacts your health. Is it racist? Is it racial? Or is it eugenics? And sometimes there's an overlap with it. So our job at the Acumen Group is to go through these things, the news headlines, as well as most of the pop culture that you watch and stream and view and listen to, and try and determine whether or not what you're experiencing, what you're seeing, is a eugenic slant, if it's something that's racial, or if it's something that's racist. And there are differences that denote whether it's a legal remedy to it, if it's a social remedy, if it's a spiritual remedy in some instances, or if there's a remedy at all. And so our goal is to try and inform you as much as possible so that you're forewarned, forearmed. You need to make sure that you have all of the utensils at your disposal to fight when and if you need to, but also to understand the world around you in a very congruent and concrete way. So I'm going to put in some of the comments and pin these comments so that you see how you can reach us. It's the Acumen Group, www.theacumengroup.org. And we also field questions from you guys all day, every day, through our Gmail account, which is acumenmagazine365@gmail.com. But I'll make sure that that's put in the notes so that you can keep up with us. Also, make sure you check out the current edition of Acumen Magazine, which features the amazing Roy Lewis, photographer, who's covered and documented African-American history and culture probably for the last 60 plus odd years across the globe. And so he is our featured cover guy. But we also do a lot in the magazine, and this particular edition is still out, with pop culture as a whole. And one of the things we wanted to talk about today as we move into the popular eugenics in television and film series, the short course, which you are still able to register for, are the images of African-American men specifically in pop culture, in different television series and in different films. And so what we want to do is gauge what it is that we're watching so that some of the things that you're watching, because we're still stuck in under COVID, you start to feel like you've watched it and you're happy because there are African Americans in these roles, but the roles leave a lot to be desired, or they're written in such a way where you walk away feeling diminished. You walk away with questions. You walk away feeling like you weren't laughing with, but being laughed at. And so we're going to break down some of these things. Today, we're actually talking about a wonderful series that's now in its second season on Netflix called Lupin. And for the Black folks on here that's real urban and hood, Lupin is what we're talking about. So, so first, I just want to shout out, ladies. I want to send y'all back in here for a minute. Just say hey, introduce yourselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lindy Villakazi. I have the pleasure of working under Dr. Chantella Sherman with the Acumen Group and alongside Dr. Sophia Sparks as well. I am a local writer and reporter in Washington, D.C. And nice to be with everyone today.
Yes, my name is Dr. Sophia Sparks. I also work with these two lovely and awesome ladies here, Dr. Shantella and Lindy Way. Um, I am your scientist here at the Acumen Group, so I look at everything from a scientific and research perspective.
So a lot of times the odd thing is when we're watching television, we don't necessarily take note of things like the scientific components to the series that we're watching. However, because we talk in terms of eugenics and genetics, and in this belief of either superhuman strength within African Americans, as in the case with race norming, it can either go either way, where it's the belief that Black people have more animalistic traits than human traits, and so they don't need to be protected, or that they have attributes that make them not necessarily superhuman, but it requires that they have either some additional assistance, or their measurements in science are not quite on the level with white folks or other people. And so they need the crutch of having added measures added to whatever the measurements are. So if it's SATs or GREs and things like that, additional numbers need to be added to the framework in order to get Black minds up to par, up to standard. So there's a substandard belief there. So when we start talking about this wonderful, wonderful show, Lupin, and I think we all agree that we enjoyed the show to this point, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Right. I'm just curious. What were your first thoughts, Lindy, when you started watching this?
I love Lupin. Let me just say, first and foremost, I was very pleasantly, not even surprised. I was just happy about the turnout of the show. I think it's very well written. I think it is simple enough to understand, but it is written clever enough to actually get enjoyment out of the show and for it to be thrilling as you follow it. I think that they casted the correct person for Lupin. I think he does a great job in executing just the mind of Lupin and, following him through his journey. But I'm loving the show right now.
All right. Dr. Sparks, what about you? What do you think?
I also enjoy the series. My thing is, I also wonder if what they did in film, how much better the book is, because since the TV series is actually based off of an actual book. So I am trying to find the English version right now of this particular book to see how well the author actually wrote the book and to fill in like little pieces that I wanted to know more about, especially about Lupin's mother, to see if the book gives any other clarity. But I agree with what Lindy Way stated. Like, I feel like it's well written. Because I've never read the book, I don't know how much they stay on track with what is actually written in the actual book. I don't feel like Lupin's, I guess it's his baby's mama, ex-wife. I don't know. They go in between ex-wife and his actual mother of his child, back and forth. Like, they weren't married, but then sometimes they try to reference that they were married at one point in time. I think she was a horrible. She was a horrible actress. I think they should have put somebody else. Or her script is just, she irks me. But everybody else on the show, I actually like.
I guess that's part of the push pull with the show, because it's very difficult for me as a historian to stick to just what I'm watching. It's always sometimes, fortunately, unfortunately, a situation where I'm dissecting and kind of pulling the layers back. And so, I usually have to watch a series 2 or 3 times to really get the nuance of it, because the whole time I'm just kind of going, okay, yeah, this doesn't work. This isn't working. This does work. And I would say, to its credit, it still ends up getting a thumbs up across the board. I wasn't sold on, Lupin's X too much either. I think sometimes when they start getting to the, I won't say ancillary characters, but those peripheral supporting roles, they just start getting a little lazy with the writing. And so it doesn't necessarily come off as contrived, but you're trying to figure out in real life, would someone have just, would they have reacted this way? Would the language and the dialogue have been this way? The other thing is, I realized that we're watching this with the French being transcribed as being it's being rerouted. So I'm trying to figure out if maybe in translating this from French to English, you're getting something else, or you're losing something.
I thought that myself too. When you can see them mouthing, in their native tongue, I was thinking it'd be interesting to hear exactly how it's coming out, because I feel like you're missing some of the nuances and things in the language while it's being translated to English. Times where I feel like they spoke a little more passionately, it sounds a little dry in English. So I'd be, interested if I could actually understand it in French.
Right. And it's also kind of odd, I guess, if I wanted to pick with a few things. One of the things that kept, just pulling at me was the fact that, Lupin is supposed to be this master of disguise. But the truth of the matter is, even among the ever increasing immigrant population that's in France, this brother would have stood out. So I was kind of laughing, like, okay, it's on the one hand, and we discussed this, Dr. Sparks. So we talk about the fact that they went a long way in trying not to make him stereotypical in the sense that all Black men look alike. So, you see him add teeth or add a mustache or add the dreadlocks. But I kept saying, I'm looking at this brother's face, and I would literally go, no, that's the same guy with the. But the fact that they, I couldn't tell, was that a good thing, or was it sloppy?
No, I think it was a good thing.
Okay.
Because breaking down that stereotype that every Black person looks like, oh, I can look at the width of your nose. Y'all two have the same width of nose. Therefore, that's you. It's like, no, that's not me. So even though he did look exactly the same, I totally agree with you, especially when he was that old man. I was like, that's the same person. I mean, I was with the detective when he held up the mugshot and was like, that's the same person. I was with him, but I was happy that they did not go to that stereotype, and how when you look at somebody, everybody always focuses on a different feature of an individual, and how they really brought that aspect out of human nature when they were having all the individuals actually work with the artists to actually develop how this actual individual looked when he was posing as the computer tech. So that was, to me, the most pure and true way that science is really depicted in human beings, in showing that everybody picked out a specific feature of him and focused in on that. And that is what was actually displayed in everybody's rendition of how this person actually looked.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to mute myself. I agree. I think that they didn't put too much emphasis on trying to just attack. I'm glad there was no scene that came up where they just tried to attack any random, Black man that kind of fit that character type that he looked at on the street. They stayed very specific to, no, we need to find Lupin. We have an idea what this man looks like. Soon as he was that old character, that old man character, that detective was able to see right away, okay, this is clearly him. So I do like that aspect of it. It's very respectfully done, tastefully done.
How do you think they managed the script with relation to, again, just having a film or having a series that deals with that immigrant population? If you go to I don't know if you've traveled to Paris before, if you've traveled to France in general before, but there's an area that they call Little Africa. And in that area, it's not by happenstance, but at the same time, most immigrant populations, they end up gathering together. There's a large Chinese population there that I wasn't aware of starting out, and it was just like, wow. I didn't think of this, but it seems like each group is kind of lumped into one neighborhood. And again, that may be just a cultural mechanism that's for the benefit of the folks there. So they're all speaking the same languages, or the grocers carry the foods that this particular group of people would necessarily want, that type of thing. The housing is all the same. But I don't think I've ever come across, or I haven't come across of late, any type of program where we actually see the story from the perspective of a group of people that's migrated to France, and who are not necessarily first generation, but maybe second or third generation. So what did you guys think about that?
I was looking for a lot more, individuals that looked like him, especially love interest. I noticed that he never seemed to have an interest romantically that, was kind of an immigrant or of his same background or culture, which I found to be interesting. I guess he was just so submerged in that environment he was in growing up that, that's just stayed the storyline. But I think that it doesn't allow you to see how diverse that that area is and that culture is there. It shows it in just a very like one word way. So I would have liked to see more diversity in that respect.
Yeah,
I agree. One thing that I noticed is a lot of the how do you call them, the stand-in or fill-in actors and actresses that would just be randomly on the street. All of them was of one note. Okay. Like there was no even diversity on the streets. I mean, you're going into different establishments, but only this one group. I recall the scene when they were in another country, the neighboring country, and they went to this one town and they came in to try to utilize the phone. Okay. And in that town, it was one note, but it did not make any clear distinction to me that they were in a different country or outside of the city that he was at, besides the look of the buildings, because the population looked exactly the same. They didn't show any type of diversity or differences when he traveled around this city, when he went to another country. Everybody is the same. You have the same people, same look. Everything is exactly the same. So I agree with Linda Way. Like, I wish they would have brought that in, because the only characters that you have that are different are all thieves or thugs or miscreants or however you want to mention it. And there's only three. I mean, other than that, it's like, where's the world in that particular country? And it's like, nope, we're in a world all of in ourselves, and how we really don't have anybody coming in to our space except for these three people who somehow miraculously made it here, and they were the only three who were able to make it and stay.
The interesting thing about that, eugenically speaking, one of the things that I had, I would say, a major issue with, and it wasn't Lupin itself, the characters, the roles, all of that was fine, but it did the same thing in many instances that we saw with Luther. So if you're familiar with the television series that Idris Elba did a few years ago, I believe it was a BBC product, but you end up with this dynamic Black male character, but he is a lone wolf in the sense that, just like Lupin is amazing, he's a genius of disguise, and he has this criminal edge to him and all of this. Luther is a police officer, he's a detective, but his mind is so sharp that he can get into the minds of the miscreants and the most deceptive types of people in order to solve crimes. But the way Luther was developed is the same way in many instances that Lupin was, where there are no Black people around him. He has no Black relatives. His love interests, no Black people. He's not playing ball or hanging out or in a neighborhood. There are no other Black people. And when or if another Black person shows up, they become the antagonist immediately. So you almost have to choose between the good Black person and the bad Black person. And so you start to see, I think, with Luther, the introduction of a Black female. I want you to be real clear. There's not a single Black female that shows up in Lupin. Spoilers and whatever else you want to call it. There are no Black women anywhere in this entire series. And the fact that we've had 2 seasons of this now, I'm trying to, again, the journalist in you says, I want to see gradations and I want to see representation across the board. The historian in you says, you're not even giving me a clear assessment, as you were talking about, Dr. Sparks, as you're talking about, Linda Way, where I don't even know where I am because it's a monochromatic, all I'm seeing is one thing here. And it looks like this one person is the only person like this that's there, which makes them the quote unquote unicorn. And so that for me, when we start talking populations, can be problematic. It's problematic on a social level when most people are still watching television to gauge how they are to react and respond to people who don't look like them in what they consider to be their communities. All right. So it doesn't allow for a lot of tolerance when you don't see that. And then when you do see this person come in, they're either completely integrated and cut off from the rest of the people who look like them, or they're there to cause trouble. Right. So it's a bit of weird. But yes, Lindy.
Well, no, I felt that especially for him, them having a Sierra Leonean background, it's just you don't get any kind of scope into the richness of their culture. There's nothing that connects it to, his mother, at least in the first season, for example, nothing that really connects it back there. And that would have been nice to see, because then there's so much more to him and his father outside of these excursions that he's on,
Right.
Being a thief or whatever else he's doing is not a part of his culture. So yeah, it definitely gives people a closed view, very closed view.
Yeah. So do you think the show at this point would benefit? Because I understand they're still going to come up with a season 3, perhaps, kind of crossing your fingers and holding out hope at this point. Would the show benefit from at least the addition of, 1 or 2 characters who actually look like him? It doesn't necessarily have to be a love interest, but definitely a Black female somewhere on the show. I don't care if she's the police officer chasing him down or something, but can we please just, find his long lost mother to come back, something, or at least show. I don't even think where was he living? No Sierra Leonean folks there. No one. Yeah, I just didn't see that cross-cultural pollination that is absolutely taking place all over Europe. It was just absolutely missing. Do you think it'll benefit from that if they're picked up for another season?
Sorry, I'll say. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Lindy.
No, I was just saying, absolutely. I would like to see especially more Black male characters that are in different positions that are not criminals in there. If one of his connects, like his jewelry store friend, or another African or Black companion, that would be amazing to see as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I would like to see more diversity. One way I think they can bring it in is through his son. I don't want a Black police officer. I just think it's going to stand out too much and it's not going to look organic. It's really going to make it look off. The way I think they can more so bring it in is through his son, because now they can bring in the aspect of, okay, you have, as his mother calls him, the mixed or biracial child, which we can talk about later, which got on my nerves. I really dislike that comment that she made. But really showing him he can either end up dating a Black girl, an Asian girl, something other than your typical stereotypical white individual. And I think weaving it in through the son and showing more of his interactions, like with his friends and with his dad, and allowing that aspect, and then bringing in the parents, and you see the parents in the background and things like that. I think that could work out pretty well. because they really don't show much of his son's friends or really his background, and because that aspect hasn't really been fleshed out, and who does his son talk to concerning like his parents and his dad. He's not talking to his mom. He's going to talk to another peer. So bringing his peers in, I think, would help.
I think that would work, and maybe even a school teacher, or just someone else that's pivotal, but at the same time can be a multi-dimensional type character. Again, I think that the ex-girlfriend, ex-wife, whatever, the character is just kind of flat. And so to go through 2 entire seasons at this point and be this flat, it's like, okay, this is what, like, okay, we need to have a character that's going to play the mother. And so that's it, or the ex. And this is what you end up with. One of the things that I think as the scope starts to open that I don't want to see, though, is what's happened a lot in British television, where you start to get a whole rush of hood films that talk about, I don't even want to say urban life, because all of it's urban. And I think that, well, in that way, maybe it does hit some of its marks. Youth culture in England is pretty treacherous sometimes. And so I would say probably when we get to about 2010, right in that era, you start to get a whole series of films that are written, directed, and they cast just a whole scope of Black British or non-white British youth in it. And so the stories are super violent, super misogynistic. And the odd thing, though, is that the storylines are hard-hitting and they're gripping. And so because of that, you end up kind of getting pulled into them. Noel Clarke, who's in a bit of trouble right now, who's an actor who started off on Doctor Who and a few other shows over there, did a series they call hood films, because they start off kidulthood, which is, an age in between like 13 to about 17. You're not an adult, but you're not technically a kid. So they fused it. And so the title of the film is Kidulthood. From that, the second in the series is Adulthood. And then finally Brotherhood. And so you have to get through the first film and into the second to make sense of the first film. Because otherwise all you're looking at is just kids fighting and having sex and just graphic, crazy violence. I didn't realize that, over there I'm thinking, are y'all just doing drugs and skipping school? I don't get the point here. But what you're doing is you're trying to show how the actions that you take as a young person at 14, 15, 16 follow you to your 26, 27, 28, and in some instances for the rest of your life. So by the time we get to, the last series, Brotherhood, the character that was 17, 18 in the first one is now 45. And the drama that he created with the drugs and the fighting and the murders and all of this are still following him at that point. So on the one hand, I would say it's almost like the films that we had with John Singleton and The Boys in the Hood and the Menace to Society type films that we had some time ago. So I'm trying to figure out if there's a happy in between with some of this. And I don't know that I've actually found it, especially with young folks, except with there's a South African series that's on Netflix right now. And what is it called? And it's going to come to me. I'm sorry, Lindy, what'd you say?
Sorry. I'm thinking about it and I'm mad the name of it is blanking my mind as well.
I can't recall the name of it right now. But you do have a few series that are trying to get a frame around youth culture, a frame around that 13 moving forward. And so you'll have series like Shadow, Queen Sono. again, it's amazing because again, they're coming out of South Africa. They're coming out of spaces where it's not this. They're not immigrants in another space though. And so I don't know if that has something to do with it, where you start to see the characters as multidimensional from start to finish, as opposed to bits and pieces of what the culture is in a dynamic space, in a different type of space. So it'd be really, really interesting to see how this would play out as we go forward. What are some of the things that you guys are watching that you think would hit right now? Whether it's Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime, what are you streaming that you think is of benefit? You can unmute yourself. Look how y'all are thinking like really hard.
I mean, when you say of benefit, a lot of the shows are either historically inaccurate. The shows that bring science in there are scientifically inaccurate. Like, what's the show where they're looking for love? The One? Is it called The One? The One. So it's like you have to literally turn your brain off and just look at it for pure entertainment. Otherwise, yeah, no, mostly things I go to is YouTube, looking at like things from like John Henry Clark. So I'm looking at more so things from decades ago, because things that are out right now are just tomfoolery.
Wow. Linda, what about you?
I'm laughing at the tomfoolery part. I agree. I think, honestly, COVID has made me kind of step back a little bit from TV to a certain extent. So I do YouTube a lot. That is kind of my go-to. Listening to a lot of podcasts and some of the web series. Some of the web series are great. That's actually how I'd found, not to be off topic, but like Insecure, for example. Issa Rae had her web series prior to that. And there's so many content creators on YouTube that just have, interesting storylines. One I personally like, Juju, the web series. I'm not sure if it's of benefit, but I know something that people tend to appreciate about it is it's a story following 3 young Black women who learn about their powers, their superhuman powers that they have, ability to read minds, ability to move things, just a light that we don't tend to see us in without it being demonized or without it, being a negative thing for us to be empowered in a supernatural way. So yeah, YouTube is big for me.
Yeah, I just thought of one that I actually watched. Again, turn off the scientific brain. It is pure entertainment. I just want to stress, purely entertainment. Black Lightning. That is a Netflix series that I actually watch. But yes, once again, brain off.
Well, this is the thing. I think we covered some of these in, again, this edition of Acumen, where we asked the editors for their favorite films, music, series, and all of that. The name of the TV show I was thinking of, the South African series that deals with youth, is called Blood and Water. And it's a fabulous, fabulous show. They're moving into their second season as well. But I could follow along with it. And I was just like, okay, this isn't making me cringe. I'm kind of in there. But what do you think of this? Also, what I'm finding a little difficult, I love Netflix sometimes. Other times you're like just completely garbage. I'm sorry. But other times Netflix is on a nice little even keel. Everything is going great. And then they cancel a series. So what do you think about the cancellation or the non-pickup of Lovecraft Country? Were you a fan of the series? And what do you think about the fact that they decided not to bring it back?
I'll take this one first, Linda, because mine is short. I could not get into Lovecraft. Could not. I think I lasted all of the first 2 minutes of the show. It was like, not going to happen. So It doesn't bother me one bit that they did not pick that back up.
I'll be honest, I was not a consistent viewer of the show. However, I did enjoy what I saw. And I will say that it kind of doesn't surprise me. I feel like it was a little too deep, a little too real, a little too out there, maybe for a lot of people. Yeah, I'll kind of leave it at that. I think there's certain messaging that they didn't want to play with that show and with that script, to be honest with you.
This is the thing. I think that in historical terms, Lovecraft, for me, it was hitting its marks. There were a number of things, you know, it was different, put it like that. And because it was so different, it garnered my attention, and then it kept it. There were a number of things in it that just took me into left field, and it was like, and I'm not trying to go back, you know, but it does bring up something that we don't talk about in this culture at all, because it's extremely taboo, and taboo is the word. So the fact that you have a nation that, despite the fact that it talks about, you know, one nation under God, and you have churches all over the place, a lot of the white people, a lot of Europeans that came here to this country, they believed in witchcraft. They believed in casting spells. They believed in potions. They believed in, you know, numerology. They believed in, you know, conjuring spirits. And so I think it's always odd that when we talk in popular culture about anything that becomes mystical, quote unquote, magical, whatever it is, hoodooish, juju, you know, it all of a sudden has a black face to it. And for me, that's all. I don't care. I remember one of my favorite Sean Connery. It's not even Sean Connery at this point, but those 007 movies. It was like, can we get some black people on here? And then they did Live and Let Die. And the first thing they did was run to a fictional Caribbean country where the folks are practicing some type of demonized religion or something, and they're just going for broke. And they immediately connected in the script to New Orleans. And they just keep it moving as if whatever is going on, you know, the criminality, the vice, whatever else is going on, is naturally attached to black faces and this conjuring thing. And to actually see, you know, I know we've had different little TV shows on the WB or whatever that tried to deal with quote unquote conjuring, and it was like, no. But, you know, there are all types of language, and there's all types of liturgy and documents that show from the founding fathers moving forward. You had these folks that were heavy into rituals. They were heavily into secret societies and all of that. And so one of the things that Lovecraft Country absolutely opened up was an understanding that part of racism and all of these other things have a trope that's in rituals that are not godly at all. Okay. And they're definitely a part of conjuring and the whole, you know, witchcraft and whatever else, whatever it is that they want to call it. It's a different level of, there's a spiritual component to it. And so I think that they pulled some of that out. And that's one of the reasons why I was thinking, yeah, y'all might be going too far with some of this, because you're freaking people out. You know, and I some people were watching and be like, Doc, I'm not feeling this. You know, I got to go to church and burn some candles or something, because I don't know what you got me watching. And I just kept saying, okay, I get it. You know, it's not for the faint at heart, but that was the rationale behind it. You know, white people get pushed off from this as if anything that's related to, you know, anything that's not strictly Christian doesn't belong to them. Lindy, were you jumping in there?
You see, my issue with that is the fact that, okay, anything that's not Christian is not related to them, but why is anything that's not Christian always have to be demonized or made out to be some type of scary experience? Because truly, yes, while there are a lot of white people that, you know, practice witchcraft or conjuring, whatever people consider it to be, and there still are some today, depending on where you are, you know, there's a lot of people of the African diaspora where that is their practice first. You know, and spirituality is always in media. That type of or sector of spirituality is always made to look scary or demonic, or it must be playing with some kind of, you know, bad demons. And you know, that's not that's not the case. You know, it's always being portrayed as to where it is for evil or something to mystify the true practice of that, you know. So that, yeah, that's the issue that I have with it. Anything though, they'll slap a black or brown face, I feel like, on anything to make it look as though it is something that is not of God or not of a positive spirit. And that always bothers me.
And I think that you part. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sophia.
Hearing y'all talk about this show makes me recall the book, The Art of War. And the biggest thing that they always talk about in that book is that you don't beat someone with physical strength. You bring in religion. So one way that you always can maintain the stronghold on people is if you demonize their practices of religion or how they practice their spirituality, because now you are always able to beat them from a military standpoint, because it's truly a military tactic. And now you can beat them militarily and keep them in a place that you want them by always perpetuating that stereotype. And as long as it takes and it keeps a hold, that if you do something other than what we say is defined as Christianity or spirituality, then therefore it's demonic, it's the devil, it's the bad thing, and you always have to go against that. So it just always brings back that book, The Art of War, and this is the best way to keep to actually conquer a group of people is by doing exactly what y'all are saying that this show does or alludes to.
I mean, and I think I think it's brilliant. That's why I said I think that the show started going so deep because it's showing you from, before the plantation systems even were in place, that you had these men who were European men who were saying, again, if you look at the numbers, by sheer numbers alone, we should be beat. But we're using something else over here to ensure that, number one, they don't know what we know. And number two, we're practicing our own form of whatever it is that we're doing to ensure we can keep them down. All right. And we have alliances that are, drawn on this, and this, and all of. So you get into the storyline of Lovecraft, and you start to understand they're talking about blood rights. They're talking about sacrifice. They're talking about all of these things that, again, if you put a black face on it, you're very right. It becomes something spooky. It becomes something that's demonized. It becomes something that you steer away from. It's something for you to be frightened of. And so, again, it's something that, we can get into that when we start dealing with the popular eugenics in television and film series. If you haven't signed up for the short course, please do. And I'll make sure that we add the link before we finish talking. But that's the whole point. You need to start understanding while you're watching certain things. And it's like, this is making me uncomfortable, but I can't quite figure out what it is. The nature of most Black people in this country has been that we wear masks. We're always wearing masks, specifically to keep those who want to harm you from actually being able to see you. And so even the series that Netflix did, what was it? Behind Her Eyes. Sophia, I think you had me watching that. That put me in the same frame where it's like, okay, you can't really see. The person you see is not the person you see. And we're so used to relying upon physically what we can see and touch that we forget we started out as spirits that inhabit physical form. And so just based on that, it's like, okay, we can only understand between the brackets of what we choose to actually accept and to look at and to examine. And when you get people who start doing television series and they're throwing this type of stuff in, like I said, I had people, it's a scene in Lovecraft where there's a house that the two sisters end up purchasing. All right. And there's something going on in the basement. All right. And they decide we're going to get down here and we're going to get out whatever's in here. And so it's they're calling on ancestors and everything else. They're doing their thing. But the spirit is in there is also calling on its ancestors to keep it there. And so you start to see this tug of war. And I'm watching this like, okay. But the number of folks I asked to watch this was like, That's where I turned it off, because this was going too far. And I said, too far from what? You know, too far. You know, so I even said, look, if you have a Bible, you actually have to read it. And you don't read just the parts that the pastor tells you each week, or there's a part of the sermon. You have to get into it, and you have to pull that apart, because some is parable. Some of it, you know, is riddle. Some of it is actual. Some of it is fantasy. And some of it you'll never be able to completely put into, your mind won't be able to conceive it quite the way it was written. So it's like, all right, you have to take this, but you have to break it apart. So I literally said, no, there are bits and pieces of the Bible. If that doesn't make you scared, you shouldn't be scared watching this, you know. But it kind of went like,
well, yeah. When you think of looking at your different media forms and how you really have to think about what it is that you're watching, like going back to Lupin, I mentioned how I cannot stand the way the mother of this child refers to him as biracial mixed. And then when you look at that and how she always tells him, I don't want you to be around your dad. Your dad is evil. Your dad is this. Your dad is that. So it already shows you this aspect of that character where she is basically telling her child, denounce that side of your father, his culture, anybody who looks like him, and you need to only accept my culture, because she's created this side is right, this side is wrong. And the language that she utilizes, which I'm glad the little boy's always like, no, that's Papa, I'm going to go see him. But at what point is this internalized racism that she is deflecting on her child? When does it come out? You know, just because she had a child with a Black person doesn't mean she doesn't have any racial or racist tendencies, because the way she's talking to him in the language to denounce that side of him is like, you know, anyone out there who has children who are, quote, now they call it mixed, biracial, multi-ethnic, whatever, which almost everybody on this planet now is, especially since slavery, is like, well, shucks, that's most of the people over here. Every Black American, I'm sorry, if you're Black and you're born here in America, sorry, you biracial. Hey, I mean, we all been. I mean, but if you want to go back to the true definition of race, then everybody Black. So there's that whole, you know, thing that she's playing with there, dealing with her child. So how is it that as the child, I want to see how are they going to progress him mentally in dealing and recognizing that my mom keeps telling me, hey, daddy's bad or Black, you know, the Caribbeans, people who are not from this particular continent are bad, and everybody on this continent is the good people. So,
you know, even for, I was thrown off, a little put off by her when she was first introduced as well. The way that she went at him about, you know, what type of job are you working now? Are you doing this or that? Like, just how condescending she was, and the specific comments that she was making were just kind of stereotypical to me. Even when they were looking for their child, along the ocean side, it was just announcing, I'm looking for a mixed race child. To me, was like, if anyone looks at that kid and you look at his features, his hair might be a little frilly, but other than that, you know that that's a Black kid. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that is odd that she put so much emphasis on kind of taking away from his background, and it's subtle, but it's not.
well, you know, again, you know, Dr. Sparks and I had this conversation, you know, a bit ago, where, you know, I kept saying, you know, we have to be really, really clear, and we have to be really, really careful. Because years ago, the term wasn't mixed race or, you know, multicultural, whatever. The term was hybrid. And it's the reason why even today I don't deal with, you know, they talk about it in terms of cars or whatever. But years ago, you know, scientifically, genetically, a hybrid is two different species. If you're saying something, one thing is a person and the other is an animal. Okay, so when you talk about hybrid species, I heard someone, oh, if you mix a donkey and a horse, you get a mule. And that's why it was believed. I've read the documents, the scientific documents, and that's why I don't play with science, even though I do play with the scientists over here, Dr. Sparks. All right. But when you turn around and you say people who have a black parent and a white parent, the children will naturally be sterile. They won't be able to reproduce because you're taking the logic of a donkey and a horse and saying since mules are supposedly unable to reproduce, that this would be the case for a black person and a white person having a child. That child would be sterile automatically. And it's like, we know that that's not true. Okay. But when you start to see that type of language revisited, and be clear, the number of times I've had to say in modern times, I'd say in the last 2 or 3 years, I'm talking to someone and I say, the belief is still that people of African descent are subhuman. They're not fully evolved. And it goes to things like our laws, who law enforcement determines has to be surveyed. It's a reason why you have all of these black people in prison. It's because someone is surveying their behavior. But if you go into all white neighborhoods, the very crimes that black people are arrested for, white people don't get arrested for them. All right. The reactions are different. The laws are not being enforced similarly. And then therefore, the law and the order, you're not going to get a fair chance in court, and you're definitely going to go to jail. So I found, and it's odd, sidebar, I went to one morning, I'm up way too early, and Leave It to Beaver is on. All right. And I still like Leave It to Beaver. I like Beaver because he's a bit of a nut. All right. But Beaver's out there with someone he's throwing rocks at windows of like an abandoned warehouse or something. The police grab him, and instead of taking him to jail, they take him home. And the police officer, it's scripted. He says, when it comes to children like these, we don't take them to the police station. We take them to their parents, and we make the parents aware that they've done something that's not right. And the parents will usually deal with them. All right. Be clear that I waited until the episode was over so I could see the date. It was like 1966, 1967. So all of these black kids that are running around throwing rocks at abandoned buildings and breaking the windows out, where's the property damage? Who owns it? They're getting arrested. But what are you saying? So what's implied with the television show is a direct correlation to what was actually happening in society. And so when you start having scripts where you're having a little black boy who technically is a little black boy, even if his mother is white at this point, being told, cast your father aside, he's no good, he's a thief, he's a this, he's a whatever, that means something else to the little kid who's watching it. Okay. It means something to the parents who are watching it. And so we have to understand, again, most people today are being informed not by the people who are in their neighborhoods. They're being informed by news media, which in and of itself is biased. And we can say that because we have a magazine, although we're not. Okay. You can say that they're watching things on television. And so if the television is informing how you look at different people and different cultures, you can say that they're probably more powerful. The media is probably more powerful than even households, than parents in many instances. So I think not too long ago, there was a group of studies that discussed how many hours per day children are watching television. And in the 1980s, it was something like an hour a day, 2 hours a day. By the time we get to the 2000s, it was closer to 8 hours a day. So summertime, your kid's not in school, or grown people. When the weekend comes, how many hours do you spend watching television? So understanding that, again, the Acumen Group wants you to be sure that when you're watching television, you're not just being programmed. That's why they call it programming, but you're not being programmed to think and feel certain things about other people and about yourself. So from the time you wake up in the morning until the time you go to bed, you have advertising that's already telling you you're not good enough. You need to fix this, get that, do this. Are you sick of this? fix this, as if there's always naturally something wrong with you and you're trying to reach a standard, but they never actually tell you what that standard is. So a number of folks have sent me messages recently showing different folks who are all of a sudden transforming their bodies. These are singers, they're young people. They're transforming their bodies through some doctor in California who's literally putting caps on and putting fillers in their faces. And I'm looking at them and I'm going, you're 22, 23 years old? All right. So we won't even get into the butt enhancements and injections with the concrete and the silicone and all of that. And the men, they're doing some stuff too. They're having pectoral implants. Dr. Miami. Yes, Dr. Stacey Palmer said Dr. Miami. Yeah, the men are putting pecs in and putting muscle fillers in their legs and their calves, so they're not being called skinny leg. So this is the question for you guys. When we say eugenically speaking, the idea of having fit over unfit, as opposed to black over white or white over black, fit over unfit, but who gets to determine what is fit? How do you think the average person today, and I'm not talking about kids, but the average adult navigates through society where you're constantly looking at something on television to tell you how you're supposed to look, think, and feel about everything that's going on around you? Is there a way of breaking some of that cycle? Any thoughts on?
I can't speak obviously for everyone, but I think that a lot of adults don't know how to manage. I think they end up managing by stressing themselves out, putting a lot of pressure on themselves, feeling a little bit inadequate in certain departments because it's kind of slapped in your face every day through everything that you do, whether it's advertisements, whether it's your social media, especially. People place such value on these very superficial things and features and aesthetic, as opposed to putting holistic value on themselves and their true health, regardless of what size you are, that you are healthy, that you are feeding your temple, that you're feeding your mind, what you're actually building with yourself, your legacy in your life. It's just, that's not a message or messaging that's as heavily pushed, or it's not a messaging that is glamorized the way all these other things are glamorized. So you have a lot of women, especially women that are living regular lives, working in the hospital somewhere, wanting butt implants. And it's just like, what is really making you feel as though you need to alter yourself and put yourself through all of these things? Who told you that this is necessary? And to fit into what? And to fit into where? A lot of people don't even stop to consider that, So I think it's very difficult for people to manage. And I think that what would help is completely just unplugging, unplugging. I've heard people talk about the level of happiness and clarity that they've been able to regain and maintain, staying off of IG, for example, for a year, or even if it's just 6 months, getting back to the basics of what real life is and coming back to yourself and not what society is trying to make it be.
Yeah, I agree with Linda. Unplugging is definitely the way to go. You mentioned how, in the past, people used to watch TV for an hour or two a day. That's when TV used to go off. Yes, for anybody who was underage, TV actually went off. You know how when you have a storm and you see the screen is black with them little colors on it go doo. Well, that happened every night. And now they're watching TV more. I knew a young lady who worked for a radio station, and I was asking her, why do y'all play this song within the hour 3 or 4 times repetitively? I don't want to hear that song again. I want to hear a different song. She says, because we're using the psychological science of your brain. If I play it those 3 to 4 times in that hour, then I'm training your brain to actually like the song. And so eventually you will hear the beat and you'll automatically think of that song and start singing the song. And now mentally, you are going to want to either purchase the song, listen to the song, you're going to look for that song. So by individuals looking at TV more, all of these ads and all of these commercials have increased. I don't remember having that much commercials when you actually watch TV in the past. So its frequency has increased. And the reason why is because they're playing mind games. So the psychologists and psychiatrists, all the sciences that deal with the brain, they have learned how can you get the brain to subliminally think and look at different things. You show certain images a certain number of times. You play this a certain number of times during one TV show, and therefore, you're starting to program people. And Linda was right. The only way you can deprogram is don't watch as much TV, or you have to become so mentally aware that, hey, this is the tactic that is trying to be utilized. Therefore, I need to ensure that I am always consciously aware of what I'm looking at and what I'm taking in, because that's what's going on. It's the same thing when you go to the grocery store. If anyone's noticed, if you look at the grocery store, it doesn't matter which company it is, all grocery stores are laid out exactly the same. The reason why, them same psychiatrists and psychologists, same scientific brain people have told the industry, hey, look, you want to trick these people into buying these certain products, eating these certain foods, lay out your store like this. That's why whenever you go in the store, when you enter, there's always that bakery or food section sitting right there off to the right-hand side. It doesn't matter what store you're in. They are all designed to play mind games on you. That's why you should never go to the grocery store hungry, because they want you to go grocery store hungry because it's designed to mess with your mind. So you need to be conscious and you need to be aware of the tools that different industries are using to actually manipulate your mind, because otherwise you're always going to be susceptible. So you're never going to actually get to the point to where you look at yourself and become like holistic, as Linda Way stated. You're not going to think about your mental health, your spiritual health, your emotional health. You're not. You're always going to try to obtain whatever it is you see that you should be doing. I mean, and the fashion industry plays right into it. Now there are pants that you can wear. It has the elastic bands in them. And just by wearing them, that is a workout. So you can be a couch potato and just walking around your house, you can actually now work out. And they have two different levels. Yes, I do know because I have looked at it. There's called a Gogie, Agogie. And they have two different strengths or resistance within the pants. And you could just walk around. Just walk around your house. Go from here to the bathroom and boom, you have fooled your body into thinking that it has worked out. So now you can, once again, get this whole allure of, hey, I'm meeting what society tells me I should look like by doing nothing. So I think that's one thing that, the fitness, and when they said, what are we aiming towards, is basically laziness. How can I look a certain way and still be lazy? I'm serious. Get out and take a walk. I'd be really gonna buy some pants. Seriously, walk. I mean, most now, unless you live in a food desert, you can walk around the corner and get some food. You'd be like, it's 79.5 degrees outside. I'm gonna get in this car, turn on the AC, and drive 2 blocks to go get some food. Really, that's lazy.
The cheap comes out expensive, right? Okay, the cheap comes out expensive. That's true, Stacey Palmer, and that's the piece that you're talking about. Though you just, every time I talk to you, Sophia, something just like it hits, and I'm like, okay, yeah, the repetitive nature of certain things to kind of trick your head into thinking this is what we're doing. So let's use that same principle and pull it over to the fact that when you watch Lupin and you don't see yourself, what happens when you're repeatedly saying things that omit you?
Is basically you deflate. And basically you're saying that you or individuals who look like you are now non-important. I have a friend. He is African. He's from actually Ethiopia. All of his children were born here in America. And I was on the phone with him one day, and his child says, "Daddy, I want to be Peach." He did not understand. But by being an American, I said, "What is your child watching?" You know, I mean, but he is totally blind. So he was listening to the content of what his child was watching because he's from Ethiopia. He doesn't know any difference. And I said, no, 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 no. You can't just listen to the content. I said, ask your child what's his favorite TV show, and then ask him to describe to you how the people look. Well, and his child is 7 years old. So he's watching a children's show, and subliminally, all the characters that were, quote, good were white. Everyone who was miscreants and doing things that his parents have taught him you should not do is bad, they were all black. And so he says, oh my gosh. And so needs to say his son no longer watches the show, but but his son internalized that as, I need to be this color in order so that way I can fit what my parents have told me is morally correct.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, I think that just brings the whole point home. So again, it's the omission. Sometimes it's not what you see, it's what you don't see. It's the omission of certain things where when you cannot see yourself. And again, you had, the Clarks years ago, Mamie Clark, and they're running around talking about the doll test, where you're putting, a white doll and a black doll in front of these kids who are, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. These are little kids. They haven't been in schools at this point. So this is a frame of reference at that point that was either about television or the socializing in their neighborhoods, what they were hearing from their parents about reading the newspaper, seeing things on news reports. And they're saying your children are even at very, very young ages, understand that you're positioning blackness as something that's bad and whiteness or otherness, that's the other, all right, as something that's positive. And so again, when you're trying to determine, why is your child 10 and they're already depressed? This should be a time when you're skipping around with, you don't have a care in the world because all the rest of the cares are supposed to be on the adults. But if they're watching television, and this is the thing, I don't have kids, so I always tell people, I frame this. I know you want to make the kids keep quiet sometimes, whatever else. But when I see small children, and I mean a year old, 2, 3, and they have tablets in front of them, I'm scared. It frightens me. When I see 3, 4-year-old kids and they have tablets and they have headphones on, that means you're not hearing what they're listening to. You're not seeing what they're watching, and you can't gauge whether or not this is actually harming the child. In the meantime, just the nature of it, the fast moving parts, the colorful things, the stuff that's jumping around, you're looking at this, the child is looking at it, they're absorbed in it. And then all of a sudden you get them in a classroom setting where they have to sit still and keep quiet and stay focused on a person that's not jumping through hoops and doesn't have Technicolor. And all of a sudden, the child is being labeled ADHD. And the child is being labeled because you've been putting multimedia in front of them. And again, I know people with the wave of the future. Let me tell you something. Old people say, a new broom sweeps clean, but an old broom gets in the corners. And it's the corners where the trouble is. All right. So you got to make sure you don't throw out the old, which worked, just because you have a new invention. And, it can help to keep your children occupied. But, I've had kids, if you put them in the corner, they find a string or something over there in that corner. Children know how to occupy their time with nothing. Okay. It's the kids that play with the box rather than the toy that came in the box. They're absorbed with things that are new. So in that same vein, we need to get to a point where no matter what it is that we're watching, understand that we're ingesting it. And if we're ingesting it, we need to be clear of what the ingredients are and what the outcomes are, what the side effects are of watching this type of programming. I'm going to go ahead. I'm still going to give Lupin a thumbs up just for the innovation. If I had to do a 1 out of 10, I'd drop it in at about a 7.5, 8, because I'm not going to get past this black woman thing for a minute. I think the story has been extremely engaging, but I'm curious to see what they're going to do as they move forward. If that Black woman doesn't show up, and she better be a bad sister too, all right? She better be hellified, all right? And if you need some characters, I'll send you a list of folks that you could put in there that's gonna knock it out. But it's like, okay, find Ajawa, all right? Find beautiful honey from off of Bridgerton, bring her in there, okay? Find someone that you can pull over that's gonna make this work. If I don't find this Black female in the next season, I'm gonna drop those numbers from that 7.5, 8. It's getting ready to start sliding down, and we'll see what happens. If you had to rate it, ladies, what would you give it?
I think 7.5, 8 is very fair. I think I might have to rank about the same. You all making me take down a few more points now after we pointed out some of these things. But I think I would give it a pretty solid 8 because it's had me very into it. I haven't felt forced to actually watch the episodes. I'm kind of clinging on to the next moment. So I'd give it an 8, a solid 8.
Oh man, y'all gonna make me seem like I'm the mean person. I am actually I'm close. I'm between a 6 and a 7. So about 6.5. Although I like the storyline, a lot of the subtleties I don't like, especially with that mama. She get on my nerve. The fact that all the men are miscreant, all of the minorities are miscreants. Don't like that messaging. So it's just some of the messaging in there that I am not a fan of when I look at it. So that's why I have to give about 6.5.
All right. Well, I'm glad you said that. Like I said, Sophia, I think that depending on what they do with this next season, because I would say, Luther started off with me at like a solid 9.5. It was like, this is almost the perfect vehicle, perfect show. But over time, it was like you starting to slope with me because I can't find this Black female character. I can't find the continuity between the amazing way that this character was scripted and anyone else that's in this neighborhood or in his family or in his community, that he should be able to filter off some of the things that were going on in the police force or with his cases or anything else. And it's like, okay, I don't like this lone wolf thing. And we see it a lot. We've seen it with Denzel Washington's characters, whether it was the Equalizer type things that he was doing, Man on Fire, you name it, it's there. And so it's like, it's Sidney Poitier. All right. And I love that. So again, this is a very Hollywood thing where you get that lone Black person that's there. And then it's just, they are so superb that there's no place for him to go. And the last thing you want to do once the other side, he's crossed over and all the white audiences love him, internationally he's loved, is to bring that Black female character in there. Or for Lupin, I said, can he have a kid, but have that kid look like he looked when he was a kid? All right.
Do like a Barack Obama. Like when people first saw Barack, they were like, Black man. He was like, well, my mom was white. It was like,
yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So you can't look at someone and say, oh, they're multicultural, multiracial, ethnic. You can't do that. Like we as Black people, we come in so many different hues. I mean, our structures transcends everything.
Absolutely.
So our eye colors, our hair color. I have a cousin. She is Black. She has blue eyes and red hair. Red, like fire red hair. And that's the way she was born. And it's like, okay, but she's fair skinned. So they were like, oh, she's not. So being able to see yourself, I mean, because for me, it just seems like, because the only aspect of Lupin that they're showing now makes me feel like the only reason why he was able to obtain this level of acceptance within, France is only because he was only surrounded by white people. So all of his influencers were the whites. Like his dad had no influence on his life. Like his mom or any of his other family members, nobody had any influence on who he shaped to be. And we all know your environment has more of an influence on the person and your character than your actual genes.
We doing nature versus nurture? Hey.
Saying. So the fact that they put that whole piece in there, it's like, so the only way we can be good and do anything is to only have the influence from you. Yeah.
I got you.
That rubbed me the wrong way. Sorry.
All right. So what are we watching next week? What are we watching for next week? Have we figured it out yet?
Queen Solo.
Now you make me want to tap into the South African show Netflix.
That, yeah, I like that one too.
Okay, so we do. What was it? Hold on. We do Blood and Water for next week.
Well, that's my vote. I don't want to be biased.
Well, I think we said either. I think we said either Queen Sono or Bread and Water. So I keep saying Bread and Water, Lord, Blood and Water. So I mean, I think I'm good with Blood and Water because I thought it was pretty cool. And again, the younger the people are, the better I feel about the storyline sometimes because again, we old ducks. Not you, Linda Way. Well, technically not you either, Doc, but. It was like, okay, I want to see representations of younger folks and just how they navigate some of these themes. And I thought that, again, this was just a great all around series. So, yeah, if that's it, we'll do Blood and Water. Same time next week. We're going to chat it out. If you're joining us and you have questions or you want to jump in on the comments, please feel free to do that. In the meantime, make sure you check out the Acumen group on our social media. Like us, love us, do all of that good stuff. Send us some emails with your comments on them. Also, if you're interested in keeping this type of dialogue, this conversation going, the Acumen Popular Eugenics in Television, Film, and Current Events. The short course begins this Sunday, July 11th. The link is in the comments. Register as soon as possible. We still have a few slots in there. It's free to folks. We will absolutely take donations, and you can always donate on the Acumen page at www.theacumengroup.org. So for Dr. Sophia Sparks and the lovely Linda Way Villacasi, I am Dr. Chantella Sherman. We are the Acumen Group / Acumen Magazine, and we've enjoyed talking to you. We'll see you same time, same place next week. Bye.